All right, chapter 2. So we're going to get into Sumer and Egypt today. The last one was a decently long recording, um, but this one should be shorter. We're going to get into these two civilizations and understand what made them tick and how that translated to sports and activities that they did. So, again, if there's any issues with this technology, I'm still figuring it out. Never used OpenLMS before today, and this weekend as I was learning. But if I haven't figured something out yet, please let me know. I'd really appreciate that, so that I can continue to give you guys a good product. All right. So the cultural components of civilization. So if we look at ancient civilizations, almost regardless of which one it is, they valued athletic ability to some degree, physical fitness to some degree, competition to some degree, and play to some degree, which makes sense, as it's the same stuff we value. We we're entertained by people with extreme athletic ability. We value our own fitness, our ability to go. Fitness is the ability to, the word fitness, its definition is the ability to accomplish task. You are fit to do this. So physical fitness is the fitness to actually go about day-to-day life. We value that a lot. If didn't have the strength to grab a bag of chips off the shelf, you would probably be pretty upset, because if you can't do that, if you aren't fit enough for that, you aren't going to do well in life. We value physical fitness in modern day a lot because we know it translates to health. We want to be healthy. We want to live. We want to have a high quality of life throughout our lifetime. We value competition because we find enjoyment in competing, and we like to kind of like to show off when we're good at something. We want to compete to show how good we are at something. And we enjoy play. We like to be entertained. We like to play games. We like to play sports. We like to enjoy life and what life has to offer. And the ancient societies were the same way. They were humans. They ticked in very, very similar ways as we do. Um, the way they had to approach life was different, but their core motivations were probably a lot more similar than we give them credit for. So, sport as a way, as it integrates with life, and as it adapts through time, started kind of as a way to hunt for food. So you work as individuals and you work as team. So you might go out and shoot a bow and arrow to hit um, a deer for food. You do that individually. Other cultures, we see it's called, I think it's subsistence hunting. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that. But it's the idea of, I'm going to go out with a group of people. We are going to run and chase after our prey, our deer, this herd of whatever, until they start dropping because they're exhausted. Humans can dissipate heat quicker than animals can, so if we keep chasing them over tens, 20 miles, eventually they're going to overheat and collapse, and we can catch them. But we have to work as a team to do so. Or I am going to scare the prey this direction, you scare them this way, and we're going to lead them to this cliff edge that they're going to fall off of. And then once they fall off and are injured, we can then go and get our food. So hunting works as an individual and team. And in a way, that's kind of where team sports sprung out of. And individual sports spring out of this need for food. Now, if you're in a culture where all you do all day is just try to survive, gotta hunt, you gotta find things, then you're going to put a lot of honor and a lot of importance in your life and within the lives of those around you on people who are good at that. The person who's the best hunter in your group, in your family, you're going to celebrate them because that's the person who's putting dinner on the table for you. And those people were honored and they were allowed to participate in more play activities. When they weren't doing their task, they were able to relax more to a certain degree. And they were celebrated because of the skill that was needed to survive. Which again makes sense. Now, as we move through, that desire to survive, that competition for honor and to win becomes essential to these cultures. And it keeps moving through time where it's like, okay, now we've got the technology, we have the this weapon that's better now. So we've got more time for game and sports. Let's keep that competition going. I want to be the best. I want to get that honor. I want to be really good at something so that I have importance within my family group or within my village. And each builds off itself continually through time till we get to the point where we are today. And it'll continue to build. So common themes that we see in the ancient world, again, survival. We need to hunt. We need to be able to not die in battle. If we bump into a different village that we're clashing over this food source or this resource, or we just don't like them or whatever their battles were over, survival became a big part of sport. Hunting, being prepared for battle, huge deals. Competition, that seeking of honor. We want to be victorious, but we also want to play. We want to be entertained. We want to enjoy life. So, Sumerians popped up in 4000 BC. Now, this is the world's first known civilization. There might have been other ones, but this is the first one that we, as modern humans, can find enough data on to say, yeah, these people existed. They were civilization. They settled. They were able to get everything they need in one place. They didn't have to be these hunter and gatherers as much. They actually started to farm and to develop food sources where they were at rather than chasing those food sources. And this occurred in Mesopotamia, which is kind of in modern day Iraq. So if you look at this picture, this is what it looks like today. And looked like then, I'm sure. You see there's green, but it's a pretty dry place. It's pretty arid. But within this area around the Euphrates and Tigris River was the cradle of civilization. This is where the first people settled down, put down roots, and were able to build something in one place. And these were the Sumerians. Sumerian society, honestly, was pretty amazing for what they had. One of their greatest contributions to history is their development of writing. So they used cuneiform. They had these symbols that meant different things. But by writing, they were able to communicate and set things in place to kind of center their community around. If you look around you now, there's writing everywhere. And without that writing, we wouldn't be able to communicate as well. So by developing an ability to communicate through written messages, they were able to set down roots, put things in place, communicate things throughout their time as a civilization. Excuse me, my throat's getting a little dry. They largely valued law and order. So, as a culture, they decided, okay, we need rules in place. We need things set in place that we understand who we are, what we do, and what's okay and what's not. It's that application of ethics. So Hammurabi's code came about 1800 BC, and you've probably heard this as the eye for an eye sort of thing. So you build a house that's not really that great and it falls down. Your job was to build a house for someone, and you failed, you didn't do a good job. Well, guess what? We're going to go knock down your house now. You did something that caused this dude's eye to get poked out. Well, come here, we're going to poke yours out now. That was kind of the law. They're big on record keeping and literary tradition. So this is largely why how we're aware of them now is that there was this writing, there was this record keeping. They were proving their own existence by creating materials that were distinct to their culture. And one idea that they had early on was that the Sumerians believed that they existed to serve the gods. Now, as we move through time, though, they kind of changed their minds, or their culture changed. It was no longer they were there to serve the gods, but instead the rulers, their kings, weren't subservient to God. They were the gods. They represented God. They were synonymous with the gods. These rulers were almighty. They were all these powerful people within the society. Now, what this meant was that only gods and kings were able to express their individuality. Ordinary people were meaningless. They were expendable. They weren't individuals. No, they were just this collective group that was able to accomplish tasks for the kings and the gods. So what does this mean as we're studying physical fitness? What this meant was that they didn't put a huge value on the body. Body doesn't mean much when you're expendable. You only live to serve the kings. You only live to make sure this civilization exists. It could just toss you aside as long as these rules were put in place. We were able to continue to build technology so that we can settle in one place and serve the kings and the gods better. So there wasn't much value on the body. And we know this largely by looking at their art. In early civilizations, the writing wasn't extensive. They did have writing. The writing was amazing compared to what happened before these civilizations. But we can look at the art. Now, let's think, for example, you go into a museum and there's all this Greek art. You look at Greek statues. It's like every last one of them is naked, right? Or at least like scantily clad with just a robe sort of around them, because there was a lot of value in Roman and Greek society to being this picture of a strong and firm human. Now the Sumerians, you don't find that. No, instead, what you see is if anything has to do with the body, you find pictures of hygiene. Now they weren't necessarily super hygienic people. It was a dry climate. They didn't have much technology. Soap was first invented here. It was new. They didn't understand why it was good to be clean quite yet. But there were some ideas of hygiene. In fact, this is actually I believe, a perfume recipe. There's, oh man, I feel bad forgetting her name, but the first chemist in history was this lady who made perfumes. And so in this art, we find hygiene. But that's as far as the body was concerned. Okay, we probably need to bathe occasionally. We need to wear perfume so we don't smell bad, that sort of thing. But the art was more focused on power and luxury. The body wasn't special at all. No, it was this what we covered it with, this demonstration of how powerful we were, how we have amassed, the kings have amassed the ability to rule and to look different and to demonstrate how powerful they are and how settled they are in one place and how much they can invest their time in things that are beautiful rather than just survival. Does that make sense? So, in fact, nakedness was seen as very humiliating and subjective. So, if someone was naked, it showed that they didn't have the wealth to garnish themselves with gold and jewels. No, they were just this naked person. Let's push them aside, not as worth as much to us. We don't need to put that in our art. No, that's bad. Let's show pictures of gold and diamonds and whatever adornments. So, Sumerians in sport, again, keeping in mind that they aren't concerned with the body looking good or being strong. So sport, one of the sports that was important was lion hunting. So lions were this threat for an early civilization, right? If you have your people coming in contact with lions and people are getting mauled, then yeah, that's probably a good place to start to exert your power and exert how great you are. So what these people, the Sumerians, would do is they would go out, their warriors and their aristocrats, to go show how powerful they are and how courageous they are. They would go and maybe as a group they would surround a lion. Now the brave and courageous ones would get up close and try to fight it. The less brave ones would hold back. And many of the brave ones ended up dead, mauled by a lion, but they demonstrated how courageous and how athletic they were to get close to it. But we don't know for sure of that, actually. We know that courage was part of it, but it could be courageous just being there. And it did serve a utility if we were trying to get rid of the lions, push them away from us. But what we also find looking at looking back at them, is we find that there was a ceremonial and ritualistic aspect to it. When they actually killed a lion, they would, pour wine on it. There was a ceremony, a ritual, something maybe bordering on religious about that experience for them. And we see for the first time in history that religion and sport are tied together to some degree. Now, the most famous Sumerian was Gilgamesh, the king who ruled from 27th century BC, and he was honored as being an excellent hunter and warrior. They put great value, even on their leaders, of being warriors, being able to defend. So their sports, again, were very functional. They were war skills primarily. Boating, which was a great ability if you lived along the Tigris and Euphrates River, was being able to boat. You could get places quicker. You could fight better. You could travel your armies without being exhausted easier. And they also invented board games. So the actual city of Sumer, economics and political system were highly developed. Again, these people were highly dedicated to building a civilization. There's trade, travel, entertainment, and warfare were all routine activities, and this is kind of what they were focused on. Less so the body. So, moving on, one of the biggest and most powerful civilizations in history was ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt came about at 3000 BC. And it lasted for, I would say, 2,200 years or 2,500 years, somewhere in there, well over 2,000 years. So as you're picturing this, it's easy to kind of get this snapshot of ancient Egypt in time from what you've heard of it. When in reality, ancient Egypt existed longer than Christianity as a religion has existed in the world. Right? As Christ came 2,000 something years ago, ancient Egypt existed for 2,000 something years ago. So the difference between the first people in ancient Egypt and the last people was as big as the difference between the time that Christ was walking the earth and the time that we are. It's a huge amount of time. Now, the ancient Egyptians are pretty interesting because they built huge things. We have like the pyramids, which still stand today, and they're absolutely insane. People travel all over the world to go see these pyramids. Now, within them, we can see forgetting the word right now. The people who study history and study, they can go down the Indiana Jones, forgetting what he was, but yeah, completely blanking. They go back, they can go down, and they can look in these tombs of the pharaohs and the people who lived, and they can see what was valued. So the ancient Egyptians believed that in order to succeed in the afterlife, the people, when they died, had to be mummified, but also they had to have in the immediate area of their tomb all the things that they would need to survive. They would need food, they would need drink, they would need entertainment, they would need pets, family, whatever it was there in that tomb. So we can look at these tombs and the artwork and the walls around them and the art that exists outside of the tombs and see what the ancient Egyptians valued at a very high degree. And there's a lot of artifacts that exist because they were so dedicated to preserving them. And they were preserved in these giant boxes or giant pyramids. So the political and cultural impact of the ancient Egyptians was huge. The ancient Greeks and ancient Romans built off of them. Ancient Egyptians were huge into medicine as a science. They were the first ones to look at medicine as a science. Now, the way that they looked at it did include magic, which probably isn't science. But they did have skill as doctors and surgeons and were known for that around the ancient world. They were this primary pillar of what it looks like to have a good care of the human body and be able to fight off disease. They're very clean, whatever it may be. They had it figured out relative to other people that existed in the same time as them. So we can look at their paintings, like I was saying, their artwork, and we can see, like for example, they would row as a sport. We can see that in this one. This one, we can see them playing a game of chess or checkers, which was invented by the Egyptians. Maybe not the same exact game we play now, but a very similar concept. So in the early period, from 3000 to 1500 BC, because you can split up ancient Egypt into three main time periods. I won't get into that, but within this earliest one, artifacts demonstrated there was widespread sports and games. So even in the earliest part of ancient Egypt, you had, this is a, believe it or not, a bowling alley. I taught, the first class I taught here at Baylor, I taught two classes in my first, 2 courses, 4 classes. I taught one walking class, believe it or not. I taught college level walking. Very interesting experience, actually kind of fun. And the second one was I taught 3 classes of bowling. And I learned in that, when I was teaching that, class that bowling was invented by the ancient Egyptians. Whether you like it or not, I don't. I hate that sport. No offense to anyone who bowls, but they invented it. Additionally, they came up with games like this one here. But the reality was there was this constant threat of war. If you are amassing resources, you are building something stable, people want what you have. So they were under attack constantly. So the ancient Egyptians were constant threat of war. They liked sports and games. So what that meant is they picked up things like archery, running, swimming, things that ensured that they would survive in war. If you can run fast, you're going to do well in battle. You have that foot speed to do what you need to do. Archery, obviously, you can shoot a bow and arrow at your opposition. Swimming, that's great. You can swim to your target, whatever it may be. So there was a lot of competitions in these sports because this is what showed people were ready for battle. They would practice these sports because then that practice would pay off once warfare came around. So while practicing for something very important, very utilitarian, they were able to enjoy what they were doing and make a sport or a game out of it. They were also pretty into fishing and boating, which makes sense. They were along the Nile River. This was the very heart of the Egyptian civilization. So, interestingly enough, the royalty in Egypt played sports to demonstrate that they were fit and strong and were interacting with the people. So they were able to show how strong they were, how courageous they were, how athletic they were. There was value in this to the Egyptian people. This was a sign of power, of good social standing. So we were able to see that the ancient Egyptian rulers, the pharaohs, were, if we look at their artwork, they've actually like analyzed the artwork to show that the ancient Egyptian rulers were likely practiced it more, and they had advanced techniques in these sports because while everyone else was working, they were able to play more and get good at these sports. So we can look and say, okay, in this painting we see that the ruler is muscular. The ruler has good form for that sport relative to what we know now. Whereas the ones of just common people didn't show as great a form. They didn't practice it as much. So interesting, this festival, I was reading about that as I was preparing. So originally there was a festival, I don't know the name of it, but after a ruler had been ruling for 30 years, they were like, yeah, you're too old. So they would just get rid of them. They'd kill them. They'd murder them. And that was like, to some degree, an honor. Like, you ruled for 30 years. Good job. Time to pass it off. You're gone. So somewhere along the line, and you got to respect whoever this was, one of the rulers was like, nah, let's not do that festival anymore. I've got a new idea. How about after 30 years of me ruling, we have some games where I demonstrate how strong I am and how powerful I am still and how I can actually accomplish my job as ruler. So that's where this festival came about. So they would go and the actual Egyptian royalty would go and compete with the common people. Makes a lot of sense. It's an alternative to dying, instead practicing and getting good at sports so that you can prove you're still able to do your job. And then they would have this festival every 3-4 years, whatever it may be, to continue to show, hey, look, I'm still fit, I'm still active. A means of survival if you're the pharaoh. You don't want to die. They knew that they weren't actually these gods. And interestingly, we also see that it wasn't, so a lot of sports is patriarchal. We see that actually the Egyptian queens were also considered sports fans. They would watch and participate to some degree in sports. Additionally, we see there was actual festivals dedicated, like the Festival of Oars. A pharaoh puts this in place. They had their first ever rowing competition in history. Um, and you start to see sports springing out of this culture that values being prepared for war, but also doing it in a playful sport sort of way, even if the sports were parallel to the military training. So, sports in Egypt, like I said, they're great warriors. Their soldiers are highly, highly trained. They go through harsh preparation. And the best things that they had going for them were the bow and the arrow, sport, archery, and foot speed, which can be developed through sport, athletics. That was the primary weapons. That's what made them good. So, warriors would have some of these items with them. They might have a bow and arrow, they might have this short little sword, they might have a shield, and they might have a spear. So, the sports are going to revolve around that. You have, much like track and field now, you have javelin throwing. Sport. You've got, archery. You've got running to practice that foot speed, because again, being faster than your opponents and being able to maneuver better than your opponents was more meaningful to their war. So, this is actually beyond. I actually really enjoyed this video. Like just even beyond the teaching this class, I thought it was entertaining. So this video gets into, I'm not going to show it because it's about 15 minutes long, but it gets into, there's a gentleman who's featured in it, and he's studied very heavily martial arts in ancient Africa. Now, Egypt is part of Africa, as we know. So he has what I assume is a like a studio where he practices and people can come and learn these arts, but he's actually pretty good at it and studies it and is highly, highly accurate. So he's talked about how you actually can maneuver and the different skills and the different martial arts that they have developed as the Egyptians, even with these very primitive tools. So one of the ideas is stick fighting. Before they even got to the sword, in the early parts of Egyptian history, they had these sticks. So they would battle with these sticks. They'd use them to stun or to knock out or to kill their opponents. And he's showing how you can use just these sticks to be pretty powerful. Also, other sports that are popular is hunting is very popular. They would use dogs. These are 3 breeds that we now have. This is the Pharaoh Hound, which is a derivative of the dogs that they likely had in ancient Egypt. Also, probably the one that looks most closely to what they had. This is the Basenji. It's an ancient breed. You can look that up. And then this is the Bison-hound, I believe. Those are 3 breeds that most likely existed, or at least their ancestors existed in ancient Egypt. All 3 are hounds. They were used to chase prey, to hunt with. There's music, singing, and dancing. So dance becomes a sport. Again, wrestling and sword fighting and stick fighting is big because it practiced for war. They were into games of chance, like gambling and rolling dice and whatever, and ball games. And interesting enough, they actually had distinct uniforms, just like we do now. They were probably the first culture to say, hey, I'm going to wear, my team, let's wear red dyed clothes and you wear undyed clothes. And yeah, we can see all these different sports. The most popular sports in ancient Egypt were hockey and tug of war. And hockey, not ice hockey, but actual field hockey. But all these were there. And they had a significant influence on Greeks and Romans, which has a significant influence on the next civilization. So this ancient Egyptian civilization, again, is building towards farther and farther developing the history of sport. Now, again, I always want to connect this to takeaways. So something I actually was thinking about a lot is as I was watching this video, so again, I was talking about earlier in my last lecture here at Baylor, we can't be in the weight room as much. So we're coming up with different ways on how to approach training without this formal weight room or all the fancy resources that we have in modern day. So if you watch this, it's interesting because the movements and the general concepts are the same. How they train for war is the same as how we train for sports now. They're trying to develop balance, coordination, core strength, being able to be jostled around, bumping into each other, and be able to stay upright and efficient while building strength and power. So if you look at the stick fighting, the movements are actually highly similar to what we do, what you could develop now. So take, for example, you're going to bash someone across the head. It's the reality of the sport. Boom, right? You take your stick, hit them across the head. It's like that. Maybe you're going to hit them. They've got their shield like this, but their elbows are exposed. So you want to take out their shield so they can no longer protect themselves. So you do hit them in the elbow, or maybe you hit them that way in the elbow, right? Kind of a crisscross motion. Or maybe there's more of a sweeping motion to hit their legs, to take their legs out from them. So let's think about this. Let's change out our stick. Throw that to the side. Throw that out in the woods, let it rot. We're in modern day now, we've got medicine balls. You got a medicine ball, what do you do with it? Overhead throw. Bash on the head, similar. Okay, let's go for that exposed elbow. Let's take out the shield here. So you go, right? It's a crossing motion. You ever heard of axe chops with the medicine ball? Take it from this side, you cross that way, you brace with your core, you stay balanced on an uneven surface. Same as stick fighting. We're going for the legs. You do twisting motions, just like you do with medicine balls. Maybe you're doing where you're kind of in that crunch position and you're taking the medicine ball side to side. You're developing balance, coordination, footing, and strength and power. Same ideas. So we can develop and think from these original movements that we as humans did in the earliest of civilizations and build something off of that and continue to develop it. We strip away the weight room, we don't have that anymore. Let's mimic the motions that we've been doing since 3000 BC, because that is the core of exercise science. They had the experience. Sure, we have this data now of what's best. We can get really, really microscopic and break it down, but they understood from a functionality of this is how you move. This is how you stay stable when you're in battle, when you're getting pushed around, when you're playing basketball and someone hits you. You're playing hockey, they played hockey, we play hockey now, someone checks you. How do you stay balanced? How do you stay stable on an uneven surface? How do you push back? It's the same stuff. So I hope as I'm going through this, it's sparking little things in your mind of how to approach sport now, how to think about merging experience with the data that we have now, to create a better programs for your athletes, better programs for the people in your physical therapy, to break it down to the simplest form and say, yeah, my machine is broken today. I can't use that weight machine that I normally do with my client in my physical therapy office. So instead, I'm going to go back to ancient Egypt. Here's something you can hold. Why don't you just bash some guy across the head with it? Figuratively. Pretty cool stuff. I hope you guys see. It gets your gears moving a little bit and thinking. Because I know as a general statement for people in our field, They aren't super concerned with philosophy. They aren't super concerned with history. But learn from it. Understand it. Be able to look at what has led us to the point of what we do now. Understand the whys, the very core concepts, so that you can utilize them better than the next person. Get into that competition that's been there forever, and you'll be good to go. Thank you. I've kind of ranted here at the end. I hope you have a good evening or whatever time of day it is.